everyone, and welcome to The Gathering Place. I'm Tom Ray, and it's so good to have you today to join us for this discussion we will have today right here. So, do us a favor, invite someone else to join you to watch this with you, and please share it and let others know about it. And we also want to hear from you during the show. We'd like to hear your feedback, your comments, and even suggestions for future uh, podcasts here. So, without further ado, I want to introduce to you our hosts for The Gathering Place, Ben and Talora Bookie. Yes, and without further ado, I also want to turn it over to Ben Bookie.
All right. Well, welcome. So we haven't talked about this in probably a while. I know we've talked about the idea of justice before, um, but I don't know if we actually have ever done just an episode about it. So I can't remember, and I didn't look. So there's like a couple years worth of things to look at. I didn't look, but it was on my mind anyway. So and one of my favorite passages, and I know we've discussed this on here before, but one of my favorite passages in the Bible is Amos 5. And, one of the things I like in there is, God frequently, is like, return to me and live, but, he's talking about like, I don't care about all these, your sacrifices and all these fake things you do. He's like, I care about that love justice and mercy. And so, but in Amos 5, verse 24, it says, but let justice flow like water and righteousness like an unfailing stream. And I've always liked that imagery. But one of the things, as I was thinking about it, is even in our work as therapists, is like when people are denied justice, or don't feel like justice was done, or unjust things are done to them, there's a strong reaction. And, a lot of times it look like the symptoms will look like anxiety, depression. A lot of times it'll look like trauma or PTSD symptoms. You'll see like hopelessness, loss of trust is a big one. You'll hear people talk about like, I can't even trust the justice system anymore. So it's a big thing. And that's not a surprise to God, right? Like he, from the get-go, said to do right things by the poor, right? He's like, don't oppress the poor. And I was actually reading a book, it's talking even like in Greek and Roman mythology, like how a lot of the myths were centered around people having justice done when they were being oppressed. And so like there's this just human need for, we could call it fairness. I don't always like that word, but we have that need for that, and God knows that. And we have a God who is just and does justice for us, and he is the one who is really our champion, right? When we're poor, when we're oppressed, and he's the one that we turn to. And um, so that's the not short introduction, I guess, to just where my brain has been at. But so you all can pipe in now, but I just want to share that foundation.
You can go ahead. Tom, did you have anything?
Yeah, well, I know that God frowns on injustice.
Yeah.
If you read the book of Proverbs over and over again, you see about the unbalanced scales and things of that nature. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's why Jesus was so infuriated when he saw the money changers and he turned over the tables of the money changers, because it wasn't that they were selling goods; it's that they were using unbalanced scales and so forth, and they were turning it into the house of God into a mockery instead of a house of prayer. And so um, and so I think that's where a lot of it, where you can find a lot of those things in Proverbs, by the way, uh, because it points out a lot of those things about the heart of a man. Of course, Solomon was, in most cases, speaking to his sons and saying, "Hey, this is how you're supposed to live your life, and this is the best way, the best practice for doing things." And keep in mind that Solomon had everything he could ever want or ever need. And was it Solomon who said, "There's nothing new under the sun"? I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the heart of man is corrupt, and if we're left to our own devices, we will have more unbalanced scales, and maybe not in the natural, but maybe in our heart. And it's the way we would treat people, and not stand up or defend them. In fact, we would take advantage of them and make them feel like they're not worthy or worth anything. So, yeah, to what was it? Proverbs 21:3, to do more righteousness and justice is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. So, I think that's really important for us to remember. Jesus or Christ desires mercy rather than sacrifice. But I thank the Lord that He did for us what we did not deserve, and that is becoming the sacrifice for us and bridging the gap and laying out that selflessness, that servant leadership that he so exampled in, when he hung out with the disciples and did all those things with them. And, even the part that comes to my mind mostly, hopefully I'm not going down a rabbit hole here, but, but when Jesus knelt down to wash Peter's feet, and Peter's like, you can't do that for me because you're Jesus, and Jesus said, well, if I can't, then you can't have no part of me. And so Jesus was displaying, um, crossing that bridge or bridging that gap even between those that are without or those that might think they're too lowly to receive anything good. And he made a way for us. And I think that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. So, when you were talking, one of the things I was thinking about is when I had two different jobs where I worked with the courts. My first job was, well, it was a volunteer position, but I worked with juveniles. And then the second, and that was just a short period of time, just kind of going case managed. The second job was, of course, Child Protective Services, and I would work with the courts. And that was a hard one. That was a hard one because, first of all, what does God say? He says that we're supposed to defend, protect, right? Children, widows, was it the oppressed, the fatherless, and then the big thing for Child Protective Services is protecting the child, and you always had to show how the child, like, why would you bring this to the court? Like, why? What did you do to help so that this didn't happen? Which is mercy, right? I'm going to extend mercy to you. I'm going to offer you these services. I'm going to, come alongside you. We're going to have someone come in the home, so forth. And then it goes into, okay, you weren't able to do this by extending the mercy. So now we're going to have to do what is just. And a lot of times people, both sides, right? The abusive side and the non-abuser side, like the family or friends, everyone determined what the scale looked like. Were you doing it right? No. You never do it right. You're always questioned. So I think I said all that to say I think sometimes it's hard for people to um to see what's right and wrong. I don't know if I'm explaining it the way I'm thinking it. Let me draw you a picture. but but that you have all these things that are beating against you, and so sometimes that right and wrong scale inside of us that you were talking about gets kind of skewed. You don't know what's right. I mean, you do know what's right and wrong. There's some of that, but there's some things where it's like you begin to question your judgment. I don't know if anybody can filter through that, but
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's really good. And it could be because of bias. It can be because of we like the color blue and somebody likes the color red. So, I don't like you because you don't like the color blue, and so
Mhm.
therefore I'm going to be mean to you because of that. But I
Yeah.
think it's on a deeper level most times, that it's something much more. I even brought up in my message today, even talking about the political divide, or even the divide with denominations, that
Yeah.
the word denomination should be changed to division,
Yeah.
because instead of it being denomination, a flavor of the month, for instance, you go to Baskin Robbins, you can have 31 flavors, y'all. But listen, you can mix and match those if you want.
Mhm.
But for some reason in the denomination field, we're segregated, and the body of Christ is meant to be together. So that's a little rabbit trail again. But my point is that when we have these things going on, it can cause us to skew our mindset, or change how we treat people, and that's terrible. As far as the justice system has been, I've been on both sides
Yeah.
of the table, and I've been called for jury duty 3 times, and all 3 times I had to serve, and all 3 times there was conviction. I don't know. It might be me, and I know I had a lot of influence, and I said, "Wait a minute, guys, you got to look at the facts," But but even in that, if you I just saw a movie not too long ago about that very thing, and how people were not supposed to review anything about the case or anything outside of what was presented in the courtroom, so their judgment is not skewed. That it's based on the facts that's presented, so that someone gets um, you know treated fairly. Um, and so I think it goes back to what I was just talking about, that some things can skew, the person's attitude who is behind the witness stand, and so forth and so on. But outside of all that, it's what are we doing? Are we protecting the orphans? Are we protecting the widows? Are we there for them? Are we protecting the poor? Those that don't have anything, instead of taking advantage of them in their weakness. I think that's where we're heading today on this discussion specifically.
Yep. Yep. And what does God deem as justice? Because his view of justice is pure, because he knows what he knows what's in the heart, right? He tells us, is it in First Samuel, where he talks about that he sent Samuel to anoint David, and he says, I look at the heart. I don't look on what's the outside appearance, and I look and see what's in there. So he knows what is being produced in our heart. Is it just? Is it? Um, it's never going to be pure. Like, oh, Tom's gone. It's never going to be pure, like um, like God's justice, right? It's not going to be just like He is.
Well, I think it's interesting though, because that's what God really He still calls us to do, justice like He does, And I was when we were talking about that, I was actually thinking about Ruth and
Hmm.
Boaz, right? And this is what I get for not using my usual Bible, but I'm like, I can't find the book of Ruth, but it's right in there.
Starts with an R.
I know, but when he talks about, like Ruth is gleaning in the field, right? I mean, that was part of the system of justice at that time. Was you leave enough for the poor, so they can also eat, and one of the things was it's not just enough. You don't leave just enough, like right, like it's about like well, justice looks like I left extra there, like not because I had to, but because I'm going to take care of the poor. And of course that Ruth and Boaz become important because eventually, all right, they're in the line of Jesus. So, but so even ancestrally, like Jesus came to bring justice. But also, it's about like for him, like right, like in his human state, that's part of his history too.
Yeah.
You know, and so when we think about it, like when we talk about like Jesus understands, like he really does understand it because it's not just. I mean, obviously he suffered injustice for our sakes, but also like as God, but as man, he cared about justice, and like that's an important thing. So, um, since we're all telling stories, like I was a juvenile justice worker at once upon a time with the state. I loved the job, and one of the things that we really emphasized, it's like probation, right? But doing that at the state level, so they call it juvenile justice. But we emphasized, you know, now I just totally blinked. My brain will catch up, but like we're looking at like reform, right? Like it wasn't just enough to like, yeah, go do your thing, blah blah blah. Like we wanted actual like, you know, restoration. Wasn't restoration? No, I don't know.
Recidivism.
No, not that. That's a bad thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, the opposite.
so juvenile justice. I don't know, but
Is it another R word?
I feel like it's an R word. I don't know. I had it earlier when I was thinking about it, of course. Boop. So, because I didn't
I
get a
think
nap
it was
like some
Lex
people.
Luthor.
I was like, I only got a little nap
There's
today.
Lex
I'm like, I didn't get a nap at all. But but, but like we're really looking at that, and it is important, right? But when we think about you know just this whole idea about restorative justice, I knew it would come to me eventually. Like restoration doesn't just show up, right? Because it's not like, oh, well, you did this crime, so now you got to like make up for it. You stole something, so return it. That's not restoration, right? Because part of restorative justice is also recognizing, like especially like these kids, but even into adulthood, like when I worked at the prison as a therapist, um, the most of those guys that are in prison and women, I mean, grew up in abusive homes, neglectful homes. There was this whole piece of justice missing because they grew up in like extreme poverty, which not this is not excusing the behavior, but when we think about like how do we actually restore things, well, what does God actually care about? And it's not like, oh, here's money that's going to make everything better, because that doesn't, right? That's not what God cared about. Like that would just, I think that would fall into the category of like, I don't care about your burnt offerings. You can bring as much money as you want to the temple. That doesn't matter, right? It's a heart thing. And so when we work at that, how do we actually bring about justice as humans? Like we can't fully do it because there are things that only God can do, but also knowing, okay, God actually does truly care about it. It is important to him. And so being aware of like, what small thing can I do? Is it, I'm leaving a little extra grain in the field for the gleaners, right? For them to come through. Because, maybe that's how I can participate in justice in a way that pleases God, right? And I don't have to go advertise it, right? You know, I always like when they talk about when Jesus was talking about, like giving, and like he's like, well, or praying or anything, like, well, if you want to go do that on the street corner and announce to everybody, like, here's my big prayers, or here, look at all the money I'm giving, or look what I'm doing. Oh, I'm fasting. Like, I'm so hungry, right? Well, you've gotten a reward, right? That's what Jesus said, hypocrite. You got your reward, and
What
so.
if you are really hungry?
Well, I mean, I know, like last time
Just
I
ask them.
fasted, because my friend Scott's like, we're gonna do a 36-hour fast, right? Like then he and I were meeting, and I'm like, I'm dying, I'm hungry, I'm so hungry. All I want, right? Like, can I just have some saltines? Like, so.
I'll even eat some communion wafers. No, I'm
Mm.
sorry. That's fine.
That's
exactly what it is.
we did on that note really quick. We did a 36-hour famine fast.
Famine.
It's the 30. Was it 36-hour famine? I believe it was called with I don't remember the organization, World Vision or something. But we did it with our youth back in the day. And one of the youth snuck out and got peanut butter. So, someone made up a peanut butter jar and the Ghostbuster cross out sign on it, so that was pretty funny. But, to walk a mile in somebody's shoes in that way, to be fasting, to go without food, and, a lot changes. Our perspective changes quite a bit when that happens. But if anybody knew injustice, it was Jesus.
Yeah.
When he was taken before the people, he was unjustly charged, he was unjustly imprisoned, and he was obviously unjustly crucified. And so we saw that happen. And yet, like a lamb to the slaughter, he did not open his mouth. But he experienced it, right? And so two things out of that. One, he experienced the injustice. And two, when the injustice was done to him, he had the ability to bring retribution, and he chose to offer grace instead. And in fact, he said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing, right? And so I think that's a powerful example, even for us, when we're treated wrong, when we're treated unfairly, that Jesus experienced the same thing. And of course, we're to walk in that same light that Jesus did. And then I'm reminded of the parable that was taught about the man that worked all day for a small wage, and then the man that came at the last minute and got the same amount. And the man that worked all day, again, he felt this was unjust. This wasn't right. Why did you give him the same amount of money? I worked all day. He only worked for an hour. Well, number one, you agreed to this. But number two, it's my grace to give. Right? And so in this whole mindset here of justice, sometimes we're seeing from our perspective what is fair or what is not fair.
Yeah.
But God sees things on a different level and a different scale than we do. And he knows when more mercy, more grace needs to be shown. As the woman who was, kneeling before the feet of Jesus, washing his feet with her tears and drying them with her hair, the people around said if he knew what kind of woman she was, he wouldn't be allowing her to do this. But Jesus knew exactly.
Yeah.
And he even went on to say, those who are forgiven much love much.
Yeah.
Right? And so when justice comes on the scene, when true godly justice comes on the scene, I think those that receive it experience much grace and much love in that process. The poor, they didn't earn the wage, they didn't earn the meal, right? They didn't earn the goodwill, they didn't earn it, but grace was shown even in the process. And God calls us to be bearers of grace and to share the good things to people and those that were without. And then he went on to say this, that, when you've given someone a drink, when you fed someone, when you visited someone in prison, you've done it unto me, right? And so I think that's powerful for us to take away from this. If you have goods in your possession, if you have time, right? We're not just talking about money here, but if out of your time, your talent, and your treasure, if you have an opportunity to be a blessing to someone who's less fortunate in any of those realms or all three, then I think it's when it's within your power, you should, be a blessing, and not toot the horn like Ben was talking about, but graciously do it. The Bible says not letting the right hand know what the left hand's doing, and not going around saying, "Well, the other day, guess what I did?" Because as Ben said, that is your reward.
Yeah.
So good luck with that. But I think that we're to lay ourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust don't corrupt, and of course it's out of the heart we do it. So God loves a cheerful giver. I think that can also apply to our time and our talent. But he's also talking about our finances.
I have two things. One thing is I need a tambourine, because when you started saying that, I laying up the treasures in the home above, trusting. Yeah, I need a tambourine. But anyway,
I mean, you do have a tambourine.
well, I need it in here with me. So I
Go get it, Ben.
yeah,
You don't
I
have
got
to.
the foot tambourine too, where I could just like sit here and just do it from with my feet. But the second thing is, no one expresses a lack of justice or injustice more than a child
Hmm.
against their siblings or a friend that has something. Um, I remember, just being a kid, and my mama, she would buy the whole candy bars. She would take and put them in a can, like I can't remember if it was a coffee can. She had a lot of those. Remember those ham things? I don't even think it was real ham. And you could peel it back. It came in a can. So weird. But anyway, she'd put them up way high, and then she would get one down because we had to save some for tomorrow, she would say, because she came from the Depression era, and she would chop it up in 5 equal pieces. And that is coming from a person who is not the oldest, but a middle child,
Hmm.
because the middle child is going to really determine what's that going to look like. If the youngest one's getting more, that's going to be called out. If the oldest one's getting more, you're going to be like, nobody loves me, la da da da. That's what I always dice. I remember sitting on the stairs, just like, nobody loves me, everybody hates me, because that's that justice. We want justice. We want it to be just. We want everything to be right. We want everything to be equal. And honestly, sometimes it isn't. Just like we were talking about the poor, the fatherless, the widowed. I mean, who wants to be a widow at, like, say 25 years old, just married their husband and or wife, and then they become a widow.
Hmm.
Why? How is that just?
Hmm.
And that's why God tells us, I was just reading in Zechariah where it says, then this message came to Zechariah from the Lord. It's Zechariah 7, and I think it's 9. But it says, this is what the Lord of heaven's army says: judge fairly and show mercy and kindness to one another. Do not oppress widows, orphans, foreigners, and the poor, and do not scheme against each other. Right there. Don't take my piece of candy. Don't take my piece of candy, and make sure you have measured it equally among 5 children.
Yeah. One thing I was thinking about, I was going to bring up just some of the prophets, right? Every time they were talking about this idea of justice, when God was sending the prophets to warn Israel or Judah or whichever nation it was, one of the things he often talked in there was just the lack of justice, but how all the people would collude right? They would all, as a big group, oppress, somebody or other people. And again, part of our sinful human nature is kind of do that, right? I mean, you look at a kid who's being bullied, usually it's a group, right? It's not usually like just one on one, you know. Unfortunately, we see this in larger systems of just this group is attacking this little smaller one. And so being on guard for that, right? Because God called that out. He's like, hey guys, like knock it off, right? You who are rich and powerful or as a group oppressing the poor. Although at times, like been reading through Jeremiah, and he even calls out like, I look to the poor, right? Because surely they're going to be doing justice and there'll be somebody in there who's righteous and there wasn't, right? And so even that doesn't mean that you don't, but like one of the things and is making sure, right, I'm not colluding with other people in promoting injustice or inflicting harm on somebody, right? Because it's easy, groupthink, right?
Yeah.
Well, everybody else is doing it. Oh well, this person's doing it and they're like really smart and powerful, or they're like the head of this, so like if they're doing it, surely it's okay.
Yeah.
And we see this over and over. And so part of doing justice then becomes making sure I am not participating in that and recognizing when it's happening.
Mhm. Yeah, Proverbs again points that out. He talks about you see these bad guys saying, "Hey, let's go over there and you know mess with this guy,"
Mm-hmm.
and I'm paraphrasing. It's the gospel according
Yeah.
to Tom, but
Good translation.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
I like that.
it's saying, "Hey, let's go and seek blood," and he says, "Don't go with them." There was wisdom there. Don't go with these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's bad news. And too often we do it anyway in some fashion or form. I just had a person that I know saw some cars driving through a flooded street. And so this person thought, well, since they drove through it, I'll drive through it too. And this person drove through it and killed her engine,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this person is going, oh my goodness, why did I do that? I wish I could go back and make things different.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that the Proverbs, for instance, is there for us to help us make wise decisions in the first place. But we've all been there. We've all done that. We've all judged things poorly. We've all thought that this is what's fair. That's what's fair. Hey, check it out. When we go to the grocery store, we see that parking spot close to the entrance, and we like rush and race up to get there, and then someone else pulls in, and we're like all offended as if that parking spot belonged to us and they took it away from us,
Mm-hmm.
Every
right?
time. Every
There's
time.
that injustice part. Someone needs to do something about this, and I remember when this is kind of a side road story here, but my wife and I, we went to Chicago for our anniversary, and we weren't sure what bus to get on. So we came in on a train, and we were going to get on a bus to take us to our hotel. And so my wife stepped on the bus to ask the driver, "Hey, where is this going?" So that we can know if this is the right bus. She took off with my wife in the bus. The bus driver did. And I'm standing there going, what's going on? And they're driving down the road. And my wife's going, ma'am, you need to stop. And then she stops and says, well, get off the bus then. And 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 uh and so my wife, she starts coming to me, and then the bus driver's just sitting there watching my wife just go off, explaining what just happened to her to
Right.
me. And she's laughing at my wife. And that infuriated my wife. I mean, she was just fit to be tied. And she looked for, we happened to walk past the police officer who was on a bicycle. And my wife told him about it because she wanted justice, because it was so unjust what this bus driver had done. And terrible, terrible treatment that wasn't deserved. And so, but she was fired up about it. She was being treated unjustly. And so, there's things obviously that's more greater than that. Um, but I'm glad that we have, God, our Heavenly Father. And you know what? I was thinking about this earlier to Laura. You know,
Mhm.
Mama could have broken off bigger pieces for the rest of the kids,
True.
because again, it was hers to give.
Yes.
And could we learn a lesson from that, to be thankful for what we get, right?
No.
That would be the key for us,
Doesn't
but we don't, do we?
that
We're
doesn't
like,
sound right.
it needs to be fair,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And that's how we are. I remember when, us kids, we'd get the box of cereal and there was a surprise down inside the box. And we'd fight as kids who was going to get it. And
Sometimes they
that's
would have
not fair.
records. Remember that? They would have like
Uh,
records on it. Did you ever get
yeah,
the one that's yeah. It's
yeah.
like that's incredible. Incredible.
Yeah, exactly. I
So
remember when my dad spent X amount of dollars on something that was going to benefit me, but it was also benefiting the church and things of that nature. But one of my sisters said, "Well, how come you can't spend that much on me?" Right?
yeah.
Again, it
Mhm.
was that
You see
feeling of injustice, but it was his to give, right? And it wasn't given as, that a boy's son, I'm going to bless you and diss my other kids. It wasn't like that at all, but
the
that's the
blessing
way we
first,
feel
right?
sometimes,
Yeah.
and even with these, folks that have become, millionaires, they've worked from the ground up and they've created something. And then we're saying, hey, you need to give us your money because you make a lot of it. Well, go and make it yourself, right? You
Right.
have the potential to do that. But again, it's always those scales. I saw a
Yeah.
picture just the other day about blind justice, right? It's that statue of the lady justice, holding the balance
Mhm.
scales and
Oh,
having the
so
blindfold
blind.
on. And I think that if we could go through life in that way, being thankful for what God has given us, being thankful for what we do have as opposed to what we don't, I think it can help our hearts and put us in the right frame of mind. But at the same time, we can empathize for those who are being treated poorly, and those who are treated unfairly. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense though. I remember my brother got a horse.
Horse.
I'm just gonna leave that there. He got a horse. He got a horse. What did the rest? I got pictures of his horse. Got pictures. I've got pictures. We rode his horse. It was a pony. So, but what about the rest of us?
Mhm.
The
Let it
rest of
go.
yeah,
Let,
no,
let
because he was
it
a boy.
go.
He was the first boy. Yeah,
So,
but but that's that. What you've been saying is it wasn't for us to give, right? It was my grandma and grandpa. It was theirs to give. And we
Mhm.
had access to all of their horses, and they had a pig named Arnold. They had chickens. I don't like chickens, but they had chickens. And, so it wasn't that we weren't able to participate or to be able to ride the horses or anything. It was just because we didn't have the title of owner. And then you begin to think, this is injustice. This is not justice. This is not fair. But how is it not fair when it wasn't ours to give?
they
That's
love
what.
John better.
Thank you. I'm going to receive that too.
Well, I mean, I know we're heading toward the end of our time, but one of the things that I want to make sure we talk about before we run out of time is just, all right, so injustice has been done to you, or you feel like something is not fair. What do you do? Because our tendency is we complain a lot.
I'm good at that.
We like it, right? We enjoy complaining, right? A lot of times we will like isolate, right? Because if injustice has been done, well, I don't trust anybody or anything or any system anymore, right? So then we become isolated. Um, we get into like justice seeking mode, right? I mean, we kind of celebrate like all the vigilante heroes who are like seeking justice, right? Because some harm had been done to them, so now they're gonna like take care of it for everybody else, right? But there are people who operate that way, maybe not on that scale, right? They're not, wearing their masks and doing things, but sometimes even in harmful ways. So when we find ourselves in that position, then I mean, what do we do? If we're isolated, or if we're like, really we're seeking vengeance. We might call it justice, but we're trying to seek vengeance. Or we're just stuck in complaining about not getting a horse. 50 years later.
It's real.
50 years later.
It's real.
So,
Yeah. Well, that but that is true. That's how we feel sometimes. Now, I was jumped when I was 16, and giving you the shorter version here. The next day they broke my nose, right, and I mean messed me up, stole my bike, and I went to the police station the next day, and I said I want to see the chief of police. They said sorry, he's gone on a trip to Hawaii. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do? And the lady cop said to me, she says, if you see your bike, take it any way you can. I said, any way I can? She said, any way you can. So my boys got our horseshoe stakes and went out looking for these guys, right? We had vengeance, retribution
Justice
on our minds. And of course, it was the wrong heart, wrong spirit to have. But we do that sometimes. And the movies you talked about a moment ago, we see the vigilante come on the scene. What is it, the Equalizer or whatever it is, and we see him taking back that thing that was stolen. And you're like, yeah, go after him, and we feel that, right? But again, Christ, I want to bring this up, that as Jesus was going to the cross, he didn't deserve anything that he received, but yet he had compassion on them and said, Father, forgive them. And then the word of God says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, I will repay. And so we need to remember that there's the two sides of this story that we're talking about today, those that have been unjustly served, and then those who have served justice unjustly. So anything else as we bring this in for a landing this afternoon?
I think I would just kind of point out the common thread in all of this is, of course, one, looking to to Jesus about, all right, how do we respond? And also like relationship. Justice or even recovery from injustice happens in relationship, both with our Heavenly Father, but also with one another. And so that's where healing is, the vertical, but also this horizontal healing. And so I'm sure everybody gets sick of hearing us talk about this, but like if you're struggling with that, I mean, there are people who can help you, who will walk you through this or walk with you through it. I mean, there's 3 of us on here. Ken's not with us, but there would be 4 if he were. I mean, and even apart from us, we all know lots of people who would be willing to help you, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't have to, you don't have to walk that alone, and don't, if you're feeling isolated and like you don't trust anybody because you've been burned too many times, the hardest thing is like when we're hurt in relationship is we heal in relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you wrap bubble wrap around yourself and then you don't let anybody touch you. One or the other, right? But that's the truth. Like that's where we begin to see hurt people coming into the church because they do want healing and they do want it to be gone, but they've wrapped themselves so tightly and I'm just going to use the words bubble wrap that people can't get in and walk alongside them. And yeah, and we know, I think all of us have experienced some time in our life where there was injustice and
Mhm.
we thought something should be taken care of and it wasn't. But just like um when Jonah, I'm sorry, I was getting two stories confused because I was thinking about Elijah and then I was thinking about Jonah. But just like Jonah was supposed to go to
Nineveh.
Thank you, Nineveh. Just the same as he was supposed to go there. Remember at the end, because he's like, God, I already know what you're gonna do. You're gonna forgive them. You're gonna show them mercy. And those people, they even put ashes on their donkeys, their cattle. Like they were like, everybody came in line
Repented.
with what God's will was, right?
Yeah.
And repented. And Jonah got mad. And went and hid under that was it a broom tree that he hid
Hmm.
under? Yeah, the worm came and ate it. He got all mad. I said all that to say that when God shows mercy, it's not for us to judge either. So that's that other piece, and that's the hard piece. That's the
Yeah.
hard piece.
It is. It is. And in that story of uh, Jonah specifically, when God cracks on him later on, and
Hmm.
basically says, "Mercy is mine to give."
Yeah.
Who shaded you? Did
Hmm.
you deserve that shade?
Yeah.
Did you deserve it? And I think that's a powerful note for us all to take home today. That a lot of the things that we have, our health, the things that we've been blessed with, we didn't deserve any of it. But God, by His grace, by His mercy, blessed us, and He does every single day. Why did God let the a murderer run free and take my sister?
Yeah.
So we can have this kind of bottled up anger and
Hmm.
resentment, but there's a bigger plan at play here, and I think as we wrap this up today, that we need to stay focused on what is the Lord showing us?
Yeah.
Why are we getting upset? Why do we feel that we've been served wrong or unjustly?
Yeah.
Maybe it's something else that's deeper going on. Again, like Jonah, he thought he deserved all those things and that those people deserved punishment.
Yeah.
The person that took my sister's life deserved punishment, but it's not ours to give.
Yeah.
It's God's. And
Yeah.
God will repay in His due time.
Yeah.
But, you know, who knows? We may be the person on the other side of that stick
Hmm.
seeking God's mercy when we should have gotten His judgment. I wrote a song years ago called, it's for a movie actually, and it was called Just, wait, uh, Judgment Called, but Mercy Answered.
Oh wow.
And wow, so we deserve judgment, but mercy answered. Praise God.
Yeah.
Mercy answered.
Amen.
So when we can, let's choose mercy.
Yep.
All right. So, wow, this has been good. So, how can people get a hold of to Laura and Ben?
So
Right
our
there.
website's the easiest place, right? quiescounseling.com. So all our contact information's there, and you can even email us from the website.
Sounds good.
Right on. And you can get in touch with me at pastortomray@gmail.com. Yes.
Because I got my nails done for my friend's
Yes.
wedding. So now I feel like I have to show them.
um, I'm mad. I didn't get my nails done.
I don't
No,
know.
but yeah, well, thank you all for joining us today and being a part of the Gathering Place. Do us a favor once again, share this with others that could use this content that we shared today. We do still want to hear from you.
Yes.
If you have any comments, ideas, suggestions, we want to hear from you. You can contact us right where you watched this information today, or you can contact us through the contact information we provided for you. Again, thanks for joining